Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you guys all taking the time today to kind of get together virtually here and discuss scanning, and in particular with the Medit Intraoral Scanner. But what we're going to cover today really applies to all scanners. As you'll learn from today's lecture, the technology has come a really long way. So the fact that we can achieve scans within 60 seconds now is really the market norm. This isn't a maverick sort of idea or anything like that anymore. A long time ago, scanners used to take up to 5 minutes to just take a scan, and now they're just so fast. So this is going to be a guide about everything intraoral scanning and how we do things in our practice. So why are we running this webinar? It's really simple. This webinar is for you if you bought a scanner and it's collecting dust. And the reason this happens is because of a lack of training, really. You don't know how to use it. And this is something we see and hear all the time. I train a lot of dentists on scanning, and I get emails all the time from dentists who, unfortunately, they're sold a scanner very quickly, and then the training doesn't really come. And when there's no training, you're not confident in the product. And when there's no confidence, it just sits there in the cupboard. Part of that is I've heard of dentists that still take impressions, which blows my mind. So you buy the scanner, but you're still taking impressions as a backup because, again, you're not really confident in the whole protocol. And it's for those of you who may already have a scanner or thinking about buying a scanner, and you want to learn how to become really proficient with them, because intraoral scanners will completely change your life. Being able to take full arch scans within 60 seconds and basically any scan within about 30, 40 seconds is a huge quality of life improvement compared to, putties and impression materials, PVS, that sits in 4 to 5 minutes. So what we're going to go over today is we're going to go over the proper scanning strategy for a number of different cases. We're going to go over retraction and soft tissue management, because these are arguably the most important things when scanning. We're also going to go over what hardware you need to succeed. And this is a real classic problem, especially because scanners these days are USB scanners. So a lot of people don't realize that you actually need to buy some pretty beefy computers to run the scanner itself. And the last thing I'll touch on is team delegation and the Medit Apps. So before we get into that, a little bit about me. I am based in New Zealand, obviously. My name is Dr. Ahmad Al-Hassiny. A few of you may have known me through the Institute of Digital Dentistry. I graduated from the University of Otago here in New Zealand, and I work alongside my father and my brother, who are all dentists. And we own and operate a few clinics here. So we operate about 26 chairs here in Wellington, New Zealand. And every single one of our practices are equipped with digital dentistry. So we believe in this fully. That's why we invested so many millions into the software. Now, at the start, CAD/CAM was a real struggle. This is another picture of me when I was much younger. And that's my dad in the middle. So my hair doesn't have too much to go. But when we first got into CAD/CAM about 6, 7 years ago, the technology was really primitive. And there was also a severe limit and lack of training courses and a real lack of support, because no one really knew how to use these scanners, not even the guys that were installing them. The other issue with the scanners back in the day is that there was a steep learning curve. And the good news is all these barriers now are gone. Using scanners is much easier than it's ever been. There's a lot of training around. And the technology it's basically like comparing a new Apple iPhone to a Nokia phone. So we're early adopters in CAD/CAM. We, again, got into it about 15 years ago. And now it's a key part of everything we do in the practice. And this has led to the Institute of Digital Dentistry, where we train dentists. And we provide continuing education because, again, of this lack of training that's available. And so we've been training dentists for a good part of the past 7 to 8 years across the globe, thanks to things like Zoom and online training, but we also run hands-on courses here in the country. So when we first got into scanning, we had a lot of the common concerns that you will ask yourselves. And you think about things like, is it going to be a good return on investment? Is it hard to learn? Is it worth the cost? Is it accurate? And why would you change? And the things that we didn't know back then that we've learned over the years is all the advantages that CAD/CAM and scanners can have on your practice. And it just completely changes your practice and makes dentistry more enjoyable. So that's enough about me. Really, the promise today is I'll show you how to utilize intraoral scanners in your clinic. And the one thing I ask of you is to take it in and put it to use. Because like I say, intraoral scanners will completely change your practice. So what are we going to go over today? So the topics really today is why intraoral scanning. We're also going to go over the fundamentals of scanning. We're going to go over some scan strategies and some soft tissue management and team delegation Medit apps. And again, right at the end, we're going to go over the Q&A. So why even get into digital? So some of you, it's a bit of a mixed bag in this audience. I'm sure some of you have scanners and some of you are considering buying a scanner. And this is the question you're going to ask yourself is why even bother? And I think the easy answer to that question is just this video. Everyone remembers their first few impressions, especially when you're training for the first time. And the bottom line is that impressions are not comfortable. It's not really a good service, I feel. You work so hard providing a really good service for your patients, and then the putty comes out, and just generally no one likes to do them. Not dentists, and patients don't like having them done. Now, when you compare that to these days, what we can achieve with scanners, this is a simple example of me taking a scan with a Medit i700. It's just no comparison anymore. The speed of these things are much better. The comfort to the patient is a whole lot better. And generally, it's just a lot easier. I can teach a dentist very easily within a week or two how to scan proficiently. And that's a testament to how well and how advanced the technology is now. So as you can see in this example, you can achieve scans easily within about a minute, full art scans. So before we carry on, I have a question for you guys. Do you use intraoral scanners in your practice? So a poll is going to pop up, and I'd love to hear from you to see, how many in the audience are actually using intraoral scanners. So about 68%, 69% use scanners in their practice, which is great to see. And this is actually amazing because if you took the same poll 5 years ago, those numbers would be completely different. So we have about 2/3 in the audience that use scanners in their practice and 1/3 that haven't yet. And I'm sure they're definitely thinking about it. So to go back to the point of why intraoral scanning, to really summarize it, there's countless benefits. Impressions, like many of you have had bad experiences with gaggers, with, patients complaining. The worst thing in the world is doing a complicated treatment. You're tired, you take an impression and there's an air bubble in it. And then you have to explain to the patient that you have to do this again. So all of this doesn't exist with scanners. Scanners are faster, they're more comfortable. There's huge patient education opportunities. And obviously the wow factor. A lot of people, when they think about scanners, they talk about ROI a lot. What's the ROI of the scanner? But one thing they don't realize is that there's a lot of unmeasured benefits of scanning, such as, the wow factor. Patients go and tell their friends, and they're very easy to modify and store. This is a really interesting survey, and it's almost matching the results we got in the poll. I think our results are a bit more skewed because obviously people are likely to have a Medit scanner and join this webinar today. But the American Dental Association recently surveyed close to 400 dentists, and they found that 53% use scanners in their practice. And why I wanted to share this with you is just to send home the point that this is not a, 5 years ago, hardly anyone was using them. And, there was a lot of distrust in the technology. These days, it's here, it's now. Digital dentistry is the future, and you just have to jump into it. And the satisfaction was reported at 91% of all dentists using these scanners. A classic one that I always get asked about is accuracy. And the good news is, again, these scanners have been around for a long time, guys. So now that we're getting research, we're getting a lot of research about intraoral scanners, comparing them to impression material. And really the research it comes to a really easy conclusion, and that is digital impressions are as accurate, if not more accurate, than conventional impressions. And that really makes a lot of sense. That is to say that both are taken well. It's not comparing a bad scan to a good impression. But if a scan is done properly, they are a clinically acceptable alternative to impression material. So if there's no accuracy issues, really the only barrier now is obviously cost. And a lot of this, people that use scanners a lot anecdotally knew of this. They knew that scanners were accurate. And the reason why they knew is, this is an example of a full mouth rehab that I've carried out using intraoral scanners and in-house CAD/CAM. And so if you look at these x-rays, a lot of these margins, I'm sure any of us would be happy with that. And so definitely the accuracy is there. That's no argument anymore. The other thing is we're getting more and more research about the trueness between scanners. And so this research looked at basically full arch scans and which scanners gave the best results. But I think the most interesting thing is what they concluded, and this is a really key aspect, is that the scanner itself is not the only factor in determining accuracy. A lot of people get caught up. What's the most accurate scanner? Realistically, these days, that's the least important factor. It really comes down to the operator and the conditions of scanning. This is a fantastic research that hasn't been published yet, but this team of dentists at the Medical University of South Carolina, they're releasing this data, which is incredible. What this is basically showing is they took a cadaver jaw and they scanned it with all these different latest generation scanners. And what the data is basically showing is that all the scanners are roughly in the same micrometers of error. So the accuracy of all these scanners are all very similar. So you don't really have to pick a scanner based on accuracy because they all work well. And this is something, again, that I've found. These are some of the scanners in our practice. And I've used all of these scanners in-house. And I get asked a lot, which is the most accurate? To me, clinically, they all work. They all work more than enough. They're all definitely sufficient. You're not comparing technology of 5 to 10 years ago. So on that topic, I have another question. For those of you, because we've got the majority here that use scanners, I have a question for you. Which scanner are you actually using? Again, if you took this poll 5 years ago, you really only had the option of CEREC, Trios, and Planmeca. And in the past 5 years, we've seen this explosion in technology. There's so many scanners on the market now. And I'm not surprised, the Medit is obviously far ahead of the others. It's an incredibly popular scanner, but obviously this webinar is directed to those who have Medit scanners. But you still see CEREC, you still see Trios and iTero users. And there is almost an even spread of the other scanners in the small group that we have here. And what we're seeing now, I feel, is that back in the day, CEREC dominated for a very long time because they were basically the first on the market. And now we're getting a lot of healthy competition. These are some examples of some Medit scans. I've used Medit for a very long time in my practice. I mean, I use all the scanners. I used the i500 when it was first released. I used the i700 when it was first released. And really the interesting thing about Medit is that it's impressive because it's much cheaper than a lot of the other scanners, but it still scans very well. And that's the point we're getting to now, especially from China. We're getting a lot of scanners from China that all scan relatively well. We're getting a plateau of the scanning technology. So with that out of the way, let's go over the fundamentals of intraoral scanning. So how do you actually take a scan successfully? So it is a very simplified process, guys. Much more simplified than taking an impression. Generally, you start off with setting up the scanner. That's the basics. You need to know how to use the software. You input the patient details, much like a lab form, and you start the scanner. And then in terms of taking a digital impression, if we're thinking about a full arch, what I recommend is you bring the scanner into position and then press the scan button. A lot of people, they kind of start the scanner outside the mouth and they're trying to maneuver in the right position and they're capturing the cheek, they're capturing the tongue, their own fingers. I suggest just put the camera in the right position and then turn it on. And that first position you use is the occlusal surface for most cases. Then it's really simple. It's literally like a video camera. You're going to move the scanner across the area you want to scan. And we're going to go over the specific scan strategies in a moment. My personal preference, and this is something I see a lot of the time when I train dentists, is that most dentists look at the mouth when they're scanning. And to get better at scanning, I suggest you look at the screen itself, the computer screen. It's a bit like indirect vision. And the reason being is that you need to actually be seeing what the scanner is seeing. You don't really get a good idea if you're looking at the mouth. You just see the lights and the flashing. You don't actually know what it's picking up or what it's not picking up. And the great thing about scanners is that they can be stopped and started anytime. That's a huge benefit. So if the patient chokes, if you need to stop, if there's a bit of blood or saliva you need to control, you can stop and restart it. You don't have to redo the whole scan. And generally, this is step-by-step scanning. I'll show you specifically, but you start on the occlusal, you're going to scan in one direction, you're going to rotate to the buccal or the lingual, you're going to go back, and then you're going to rotate to the other side, and that's your completed scan. The last part of all of this, before we go into the specific scan strategies, is bite alignment. So this is basically taking a bite, and you do it with a scanner. You get the patient to bite down, and you scan that side of their mouth. So let's go over the specific scan strategies. And taking a full arch scan well is a fundamental skill, and it's important for so many different applications. You name it, aligners, any form of orthodontics, study models, restorative, any pretty much dental appliance. So being able to take a full arch scan confidently is a really key skill to have. Again, before we jump into it, I'm curious, how many minutes or seconds does it take you guys, the ones with the intraoral scanners, to take a full arch scan? Just a generic patient, full arch, molar to molar. How many seconds does that take? Is it under 30? Is it closer to a minute? Is it 1 to 2 minutes? A poll will pop up. I'm really curious to hear. All right. So that's pretty good. And that's really what I expect. And it's handy for me because a lot of people are saying, you know, we're in the 1 to 2 minute mark. There's about 40% of us. 2 to 5 minute mark is the other 40%. And that's reassuring to me because these are the people that I can really help and ensure that you get faster. I can share my tips with you today to help you get faster and faster, because I can guarantee you, just with a bit of training and some guidance, you'll easily be able to do it under 60 seconds, easily. And those of you that do it in 30 to 60 seconds, I mean, feel free to exit. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully you pick up something as well. And those of you over 5 minutes, really, those are the ones I want to focus on, because to me, if a scan takes over 5 minutes, I would rather just take impression and get it over and done with. It's not really an enjoyable process. So really what we want to see is everyone getting to the point where you're 30 to 60 seconds. I do see a comment by James, and I know we said we'll do Q&A at the end, but it's a fantastic comment. Does scanning an area over and over create inaccuracies? The long story short is yes, over scanning can create inaccuracies. And that's a classic thing I see with new users, is that they feel like they need to go over the area again and again and again just to make sure they captured it. And that's why I say, look at the scan computer, look at the screen when you're scanning. If you captured the area and there's no holes, move on. Over scanning area is not going to do any benefit. Okay, so let's go over the scan strategies, and it's good, you know, I guess refreshers for those who already know this, and for those who don't actually understand how do you take a scan quickly. The importance of a scan strategy is that you can do this very fast and efficiently. With a lot of these scanners these days, yes, you can kind of just scan whatever you like and eventually piece a model together. but the most efficient way to do it is to follow a step-by-step path. Also, when you follow a step-by-step path, every single time your nurse, your dental assistant knows what you're going to do, and she's 100% in tune with you. It's a bit like when you do composite. The nurse knows to hand you etch, knows to hand you bond without you saying anything. With scanning, she knows what you're going to do every single time, so she can follow your retraction. So when you start a full arch scan, I have a question, and you guys can just put it in the chat. Where do you think we start and why? The key is why, because I know most people get an idea of where do we start, but if we want to take a full arch scan, why do we start in that area? You guys can leave a comment in the chat. Someone says premolars, occlusal of the molar, occlusal. Thanks, Veronica. Thanks, Khalid. Distal of the molars. Now, does anyone know why? Why do we start of the occlusal area? Why? Everyone kind of says occlusal. So yes, we start on the occlusal. That's perfect. That's really important to know, guys. So Khalid, when you said premolars, maybe if you're taking half an arch, but really you want to start on the occlusal of the most terminal tooth. Perfect. Veronica and Joanna, you guys are onto it. It's the most identifiable reference point. So the thing to realize with scanners, guys, is the first image you take, the scanner is going to try stitch all other images to that first image. And thus, when we go on the occlusal, there are so many grooves and features that it's a very easy reference point for the scanner to pick up and stitch to that point. It is also a very good point for you to go back to if you get lost in scanning. If the scanner stops for whatever reason, you move too fast, you can go back to the occlusal. These days with the Medit, it does have smart stitching applications, which basically means you can scan different quadrants and then join them together. I think it's a fantastic methodology, and it's a fantastic feature to see in a scanner, but I would still use a scan strategy. Don't get into the habit of just scanning willy-nilly and all over the place, because it's going to kill your efficiency. So molars have the most landmarks. You start on the occlusal, and then simply, if you want to take a full arch scan, you are going to move across all the occlusal, distal to mesial. And I have a scanner here. This is a Medit. This is a model. And very simply, near the front, I want to show you guys this here. Near the front, you're going to either tilt or zigzag. And why we zigzag at the front is that the incisal edges of your straight occlusal, they're very thin and they don't give you a lot of reference data. And that's why you need to tilt the scanner either lingually or buccally, or both in a zigzag format while you're going over the anteriors. And then as you get to the canine on the other side, you do the occlusal again. And what you want to do is go from the occlusal of one side to the occlusal of the other. Then at this point, it's extremely easy. All you're going to do is rotate. How this works in the mouth, let's say this is someone's jaw, and you're on the occlusal. You're going to just tilt your hand like that, okay? Get used to holding the scanner. The one thing I realize with people who are learning scanning is they're just not used to gripping it and rotating and twisting. You have to use your wrist when you're maneuvering the scanner. Don't just use your whole arm, just rotate it in your wrist. You're going to rotate to the buccal and you simply scan across the entire buccal surfaces. Oftentimes when you get to the midline, you can kind of get stuck, You can rotate your hand. So if I'm going to do it on myself, if I'm scanning, I kind of get stuck here. You can rotate your hand while scanning to go in again to the other side of the buccal. Once you get to the buccal of the other side, it's very straightforward. You're going to rotate and then do the palatal. And at this point, you can fill in the palate if you need to. There's not a lot of indications to fill in the palate except for orthodontic appliances and dentures, really, and other bite appliances. But generally, that's your full arch scan for most appliances. And you're going to stop on the other side. If you want to see a video of this in action, because it's all fine to see it on a diagram, but as you can see what I'm doing the occlusal first, and now I'm doing the palatal. And when the scanner stops, I go back to an area that it already knows, and I just carry on and continue. You can see myself rotating at the front and now repositioning my hand. And this is really how you take a full art scan, and that's in, 20, 30 seconds. If we move on to the lower, it's the exact same protocol. You're going to start on the occlusal. You're going to go across to the other side, zigzag or tilt palatally or buccally in the anteriors. And that's again because it's such a thin surface, you want more data for your scanner so you can continue so it doesn't get lost. You're going to rotate to the lingual and go all the way to basically where you started. Rotate to the buccal. At the front, you may need to stop and reposition your hand. That's really common. I wouldn't start and stop the scanner too many times. Just keep the scanner going, but don't just pull it out of its line of sight, basically, out of its depth of field, and it won't scan anything. And then you're going to rotate and go right to the end. Now, with practice, the key thing is, guys, with practice, each art should take under 60 seconds. And we're going to go over some soft tissue management tips and tricks near the end of the webinar, because I feel like the hardest part is just controlling the cheeks and the tongue. That's where people struggle. At this stage, once you've done your upper and lower scans, you're going to take a bite. A bite is very easy. It's very similar to taking a bite with a PVS. You get the patient to bite down, and you move the scanner into place and you scan the bite in. And oftentimes software will show you that the two scans, upper and lower, are joined together. The classic thing is make sure the patient is biting properly. When they're numb and they're tired and they've been, horizontal for a long time, patients oftentimes protrude. Just always check that. Don't go in full autopilot mode. Get them, what I like to tell them is make sure you're biting on your back teeth. Bite hard on your back teeth. They bite on their back teeth. I check it and I take the scan. When you're doing your bite registration, again, I personally move the scanner into the place and then turn it on. And you want to go as distal as possible. You don't have to these days. You can actually start on a premolar where my mouse is. You can start on a premolar. It doesn't matter too much, but I like to start on the most distal tooth and move forwards. Now, the key thing is when you're taking a bite scan is you're tilting up and downwards. And how that looks is when you're taking a bite scan, you go across like this, but you're also tilting. Again, just move your wrist. You're tilting up and down. You're not zigzagging. Well, you can zigzag as well, but I find tilting works easier. Okay, and why you're doing that is that you want to capture at least 1 or 2 millimeters of the gingiva for the top and bottom arch. If you find that the bite alignment is not working, the scanner cannot bring the bites together, they cannot bring the top and lower arch scan together, the most common reason is you've got insufficient data. If you go back to your individual arch scans, you will see that there's big holes on the buccal surface. And so it just can't relate your bite scan to the individual scans. Otherwise, to be honest, guys, a lot of this is really straightforward. I mean, when we started scanning, the scanners were single image scanners. Each time you clicked the pedal, it took one image, and you had to do this 50 or 60 times to take a scan. These days, they're so automatic. The AI is crazy. It's just knowing how to position, and it does most of the work for you. Let's move on to quadrant scans, because realistically, this is going to be your bread and butter. So taking a full art scan is useful for all the appliances we talked about. But again, referring back to the survey I mentioned by the American Dental Association, they showed the most frequent treatment with intraoral scanners was a single tooth supported crown, which blows my mind, 90%. And what that basically emphasizes to me is that on Facebook and on social media, we see a lot of the crazy stuff, full arch scans, full arch implants, that sort of stuff, and dentures. That's not what everyone's doing. That's just, that's just for social media. The most common thing is a single crown. And how you do A scan for a single crown is a quadrant, really similar to a triple tray. And it is the easiest scan you're going to do in your life. If you think a full arch scan takes 30 to 60 seconds, a quadrant scan should take half the time because there's half the amount to scan. And again, it's the same principle. You're going to start on the occlusal. There's an example of a crown prep. You start on the occlusal, you move forward, you rotate buccally, you move back. A lot of newcomers, when they scan, they focus on the prep too much. Just follow the scan strategy initially and then go back to the prep. After that, you can rotate to the other side and move forward. And then after you've done your initial scan, I would suggest you go look at your prep and make sure you've collected all the information. All right. A great question here. Is bite record still accurate when it's half the jaw than a full jaw? Yes, basically. Look, I have a few slides coming up about that. And we've been doing this for 5-6 years. I do a lot of in-house dentistry. And for a single unit, it's, yeah, anecdotally, it's more than accurate enough. Now, you need to be careful. I would scan at least to the canine. You don't just scan 1 or 2 teeth either side. But yes, quadrant scanning for a single unit, basic dentistry, inlays, onlays is more than accurate enough. This is the key thing. Once you scan, oftentimes you will miss the contact area because you can't capture the contact area by just moving occlusal, buccal, and then lingual. So what I routinely do, well, my nurse does it for me. As soon as I did my main scan, she rotates the scan and shows me the interproximal areas and the margins to make sure I've captured that. And here's a really good tip for you guys. This is how I capture interproximal areas. Again, this is the model. So you've done your initial scan, occlusal, buccal, lingual. After I do that, I routinely put the scanner on the top and then pull up. Put the scanner on the top and then tilt that way. So use your scanner. You can tilt to get the occlusal surfaces. Sorry, to get the interproximal surfaces. The other thing you can do, because some people have limited mouth opening, you can't tilt too high. There's a jaw in the way. You can go from the buccal or the lingual and tilt this way because there's a cheek. You can move the cheek. So it's a lot of tilting movements to direct the scanner light into the contact area. For a single crown, that's all you need to do. You just need to ensure your crown prep is sufficiently scanned and the contact areas are sufficiently scanned. That's your vital areas. Then you move on to the lower arch for that quadrant. As you can see, up to the canine a bit further, the opposing arch, you scan the occlusal, you move to the front, and then you wrap around. You move to the lingual, and then you move to the palatal. When you take a bite, this is how it looks like. Great question, Scott. Yes, I do. Scott asked, do I scan with the cord in? I'll get to that in soft tissue management. Keep something in mind. I don't know who's teaching people to take cord out, but I don't think it's the correct thing to do. I'll get into it when we talk about soft tissue management very soon. In regards to bite registration, so Ali asked, is this accurate enough? Well, yes, it is basically. For single crowns, this is more than accurate enough. The scanner is capable of stitching 2 arches together using just a quadrant. Think about your triple trays. A lot of dentists do triple trays for years and years, and there was no issue with that. And if anything, this is more accurate because you don't just, the tray is a bit flimsy in those triple trays. The other thing about bite registration is you're going to do the same exact thing. Okay, sorry. Ben says, can you repeat the tilting? Okay. This is a bit of a white scanner, so I'll put it here. This is how I get the interproximal surfaces. I hope you guys can see this. Let me tilt this like this. If I put this in position, I do this. That's the movement. Okay, that's the movement, and that's what I mean by tilting. You're going to tilt the scanner. When you're doing, you go back to occlusal and to collect the interproximal data, tilt the scanner up and down, because that's going to direct that light that the intraoral scan is projecting into the contacts. The other thing you can do, again, if their jaw is limited, just go from the other directions. All you want to do is tilt. And that's why look at the computer screen. Look at the computer screen and see what the scanner is picking up, and you can get a better idea of where to angle to get that interproximal space. Sometimes it's harder than others, especially if the tooth next door is very tilted. It's quite hard to get that contact area, but it's always achievable with scanners. You just have to constantly change your angle, go from the buccal, go from the lingual, angle the scanner towards that contact area. I hope that helps, Ben. Now, in terms of the bite registration, exact same thing. You're going to start on either the terminal, you could probably start on the 6 here, and you start the scanner, and in a zigzag format or tilting the scanner up and down, you're going to collect data for the top and the bottom. How you scan the bite, it's up to you. There's two ways of doing it. You can either get the patient to bite down and then retract the cheek and then put the scanner inside, which I prefer, or you can push the scanner into their cheek and then get them to bite down. Why I prefer the methodology of getting them to bite down first is you can ensure they're biting down properly. For some people, it's a bit awkward to bite down properly when there's, a scanner in the side of their mouth. This was a question kind of hinted at by Ali and a couple of others. Is it accurate? So how many teeth should you scan? That's a common question I get. And look, these scanners are getting to the point where, for me, taking a quadrant scan is about 20, 30 seconds. So how lazy can I be to only take one tooth either side? And I don't even doubt that would work. I think it would work because the scanners get the two arches in relation to each other perfectly. And you're just fitting into the occlusion of the patient. You're not changing anything. But I don't do that. It's fast enough for me to be able to scan all the way across the arch up to the canine at least. And for same-day crowns, single unit dentistry, we've been doing this for many years, literally hundreds and hundreds of units, never had an issue. If you work with a lab, you have to be friendly with your lab and just also ask them, what do they prefer? As Olga put a comment in there, labs like full arch scans. There's no doubt it helps them with the bite. So if you're scanning and sending a lot and they want a full arch scan, look, take a full arch scan. But for me, I do a lot of my in-house work in the clinic on the same day, and I've never had an issue with high occlusion or anything like this with a quadrant scan, never. At the end of the day, the more teeth you scan, especially in the quadrant, but also if you want to take a full mouth scan, the better. For most of my full mouth rehab work, or even bridges or implant work, I would take a full arch scan. So any of the aspects where there's less room for error, I would take a full arch scan. But realistically, again, single crown, you don't need to take a full arch scan every time you take a single crown. Now, the benefits of intraoral scanning. Before we get into how to take a perfect scan, immediate analysis, you can check instantly. You don't have to wait for the impression to set. That's the worst thing in the world, is waiting for impression to set, pulling it out, and there's an air bubble. You can't fix it. Easy repeatability, sorry. So the scans are very quick. If it's taking 20, 30 seconds, they're very quick to delete, rescan. You can add to them. There's no handling of all this impression material to send to your lab. We're in a COVID era, guys. Whatever you think about COVID, it's still, infection control procedures have been heightened. Patient education and comfort is massive. No stone models. I think every dentist has like boxes and boxes of stone models in their lab or under their bed or something. All that disappears. Fun fact, if you need to keep the record and I don't know, there's no patients because of COVID, start scanning some of those stone models and store them digitally and get rid of that space. And it saves a lot of time and money. So how do you get a perfect scan? Because that's really the key. We know the strategy, we know we need to practice, but how do you actually get a perfect scan? What's the clinical tips and tricks that you can apply? The first things first is you need to get the right specs. This is the single most common question the Medit team get is computer specs. I kind of find it funny, but guys, just screenshot this slide, and this is the specs you need. The computer on the right, I'm not sponsored by these guys. I wish I was. This is the computer I bought. And I've been using it with all the different scanners, and it works really well. The text on the left, the CPU, RAM, and GPU is by Medit themselves. This is what they recommend. So just make sure you get a computer that matches this. If you're not really computer savvy with hardware and that sort of stuff, I'm not really into it either. Just give it to your IT guy. Tell him, look, I want a computer that fits these specs. That's one of the single most important things you can do. Because with Medit and these USB scanners, they're not like CEREC and Trios that come with a computer. A lot of these USB scanners, you just buy the scanner, and I'm sorry to tell you, but your practice PC, the dusty old office PC is not going to cut it. You need really hardcore machines. So even when you're budgeting for the scanner, you need to budget for another 2,000 to 3,000 USD on a decent laptop. This laptop is about 7,000 New Zealand dollars, but it will definitely change your life. It's the single best thing you can do, because with bad hardware and slow hardware, it makes scanning atrociously bad. You will hate it. It lags, it crashes, it's slow. And then you start wondering, what are all these results that people are getting? How are they getting these results? Start with the good hardware. That's the best piece of advice. Now, a few things. So I'll get to some of these questions. I don't scan in HD at all, John. I hardly use HD, never needed to use it. HD, for those guys who don't know, is a setting on some scanners. I know iTero does it routinely for crowns, and Medit has the option. I've done quite a lot of testing about the files and what they look like between HD and standard definition. I've never needed to use HD. So definitely just with good protocols, you don't really need to use the high definition. Now the features of the video card and the RAM, this is the specific video card and this is the specific RAM that they recommend. In terms of the specifics of what RAM it is, DDR7 or 8, again, I don't really get into this. Definitely if you need help with something like that, I can send you the link that gives you the specific hardware breakdown that you need for these computers. At the end of the day, the point is, guys, what I'm trying to get to the point is make sure you buy the right hardware. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by using, a crappy old PC because you don't want to spend a bit more. One of the most important things is making sure the computer is powerful enough. You can export the scans in HD, yes. Now, cost-effective way. Right, so with the cloud storage, how do you store these scans? I think, honestly, one of the most cost-effective ways is just to use the Medit one. I mean, it's $1 US per terabyte for a month. For 10 terabytes, sorry. So $1 US per month for 10 terabytes. So I can't think of any more cost-effective way, unless you want to export everything manually and put it into a Google Drive or any other cloud storage. The other way you can get around it to be even more cost-effective is make sure you're not saving the files as raw. Just save the scan files. The raw files are quite large. Now, let's get to the meat of it. So what actually can you apply clinically to get the perfect scan? The key thing to realize, guys, is that a scanner is a camera. That's all it is. It projects light, the light reflects off something, and the sensor picks it up. So fundamentally, there can't be anything in the way of that light source. There can't be any blood, there can't be any bubbles of saliva. So routinely clean and dry the area before you scan. And how I do this, when I've done my crown prep, my dental nurse retracts, keeps the cheek off it, I dry it, and then she hands me the scanner, and then I retract the tongue. So make sure all saliva is off your prep. If you're scanning the opposing, you don't need to dry that like crazy. I don't even dry the opposing most of the time, unless there's air bubbles. Scanners can scan through saliva, but for vital areas like preps, contact areas, dry, bone dry. There's many different ways of doing this. Obviously, cotton roll, saliva ejectors, Optrogate, dry tips, just use whatever you like. I personally just use a mirror, 2 mirrors. My nurse has a mirror, I have a mirror, and I dry the area and I retract with a mirror. The other thing is to make sure the scan is completely clean and dry. And that's another reason why I mention look at the computer screen and have a look at what the scanner is seeing. If you see a big blood spot or a big saliva spot on your scanner screen, you need to clean that first before you carry on. Now, these are some examples. Optigate is really good for full arch scans, especially for bigger cases. You can use dry tips, these sort of things. This is an example of poor liquid control. And this is blood, obviously in a deep margin area. And where the arrow is, you see that bubbling or the rough appearance of the scan. This is what it looks like when basically the light has hit some liquid, either saliva or blood. Any sort of liquid will give you that bubbling appearance in your scan. It's not a defined margin. John, yeah, you'll get access to the webinars. Everyone who registers gets access. I will do the last few questions at the end. Anyway, let's carry on. The other key thing, guys, is soft tissue management. So this is the single most important thing that you can do as a dentist. The first thing is get the right hardware, but clinically, make sure you have good soft tissue management. Again, the scanner is a camera. It is only going to pick up what you see. So if you look in the mirror with your dental mirror at the prep and there's some gum covering the prep, or it's obscured for whatever reason by blood, by saliva, don't waste your time and try start scanning. Control it first. You need to ensure that the margins are clearly visible. And to me, the best way to achieve that is gingival retraction. I know there's a lot of different tools out there, guys. Retraction paste, X-Special, Dry Z. Lasers are occasionally helpful when you need hemostasis. But for 90 to 95% of my cases, it's just retraction cord. And you need to look at it in a different way. It's not like impression. I can't remember who asked, but someone, sorry, I think it was Ben, asked, do you take the cord out? Never. Because what happens when you take the cord out for most patients? You start getting blood. You start getting crevicular fluid. It's annoying. And what's the reason to take the cord out? It's a remnant of impression taking, because in impression taking, we wanted that flash of impression beyond the margin. With scanning, there's no way you're going to get you're not going to scan beyond the margin easily. If you tilt and rotate, you can, but that's not even the point. As long as you clearly have defined the margin, that's all you need to capture. The flash doesn't help you at all. When the technician marginates, they just need to see the definite edge of the margin. And don't be afraid to pack multiple cords. Pack the first cord. Sometimes I pack 2 or even 3 cords in if the gum is really stubborn and it's not moving off, and just keep the cord there. For me, for the same day workflow stuff, I leave the cord there until cementation. For a lot of you guys who are scanning and sending, do your temporary, take the cord out. So this is an example, just whatever retraction cord you use in the practice. I don't really find that there's anything special between retraction cords. Just get a number of sizes. Oftentimes dentists only have one size, and it's the smaller size because it's very easy to pack in there. Get a good size and then really pack it in there. A lot of different products exist. I know some people like X-Special, these retraction paste. Look, they work. Again, it's the fundamental thing is to move the gingiva away from the margin line. That's the fundamental thing you're trying to achieve. So whatever tool you can do to use and achieve that, you can use it. Here's an example of gingival troughing with a laser. This is a surgical crown lengthening case that I did. Again, gingival troughing can be useful with a laser if you're getting a lot of blood and you need a bit of hemostasis as well. If there's a lot of blood and you can't control it with hemostatic agents, a laser can be very useful because you can both move the gum out of the way and stop bleeding. And lastly, soft tissue management includes the cheeks and the tongue. It's not just about the little bit of gingiva around the prep. And work together with your DA, guys. Train your DA to know how you scan, know the style of your workflow. For example, in this picture, you can see what my DA is doing. She routinely does this. She retracts instantly. I'm retracting with my other hand. I'm scanning with one hand. I'm looking at the screen. You don't need a gigantic TV to scan, guys. Don't worry. Look at the laptop. The other key thing you can see what she's doing with her left hand is holding the wire. this is a little quality of life improvement I like. Get the DA to hold the wire with her free hand, because it makes the scanner feel a bit more weightless. Because if the wire is hanging down, it's almost like you're working against gravity. So yeah, the DA should be retracting. Look at where the DA is looking. She's not, looking into space. She's not daydreaming. She's looking exactly into where I'm scanning, because she can warn me if there's a bit of blood, if there's a bit of something gets in the way or anything like that. The key thing that you're looking for is the scanning image on the computer, because that's going to tell you what you've captured. There's no benefit of you trying to look into the mouth with all this in there. The last thing that I routinely see newbies make mistakes with is they're not smooth enough. Here's an example. They're either too slow, like snail's pace, or they're erratic. They move from here to there. Follow the scanning strategy is key to avoid this erratic nature in your scan. Follow a set path and just do it smoothly and steadily. Don't jump between quadrants. Don't get freaked out because you see there's a bit of a gap on your margin. You can capture all that data later. Capture the bulk of the scan first and then go back and add to your scan by just scanning over the areas you've missed. One last thing is scan sprays. Look, guys, you may hear about this. It's not common these days anymore, but it was very common in the CEREC days. We used to have to use scan sprays. That's how pathetic the scanners were back in the day. You had to plaster the spray all over teeth because the scanners need a reflective surface. They're not used these days with modern scanners. And a lot of the time, you can sometimes use them for shiny surfaces or very deep margins. But realistically, I've never had a reason to use scan spray, just good retraction. And with the Medit, you have nice features, like they have a gold crown or metal crown feature, which you can click and it helps with shiny surfaces. The key thing with shiny surfaces, guys, is don't just go over the same area. You have to kind of paintbrush over a shiny surface, because the only reason a shiny surface is hard to scan is you're getting reflection of the light back into the sensor too much, like a glare. So the light that's being projected is glaring the sensor, so it can't see. So just take it from different angles so that reflection is being deflected. Your dental assistant's role in all of this, your dental assistant's role initially, while you're still learning, get her to learn with you. You and your dental assistant should be inseparable, because they'll make your life a whole lot easier, especially with this digital stuff. Teach them how to switch on the scanner, get them familiar with the workflow, the software, adding case details, calibration and maintenance, making sure the scanner is ready for you on the day. And during the procedure, drying the areas, retracting soft tissue, suction when necessary, cleaning the scanner, wiping it if anything gets on it, and train your assistant to eventually scan independently. That's the real goal. And even hygienists should be scanning. Everyone in the practice should be scanning, because there's so many benefits for patients. You may wonder, why would hygienists scan? Not to remove tartar. It's a good communication tool, because for anyone who's interested in orthodontics or smile designs, it's a perfect communication tool for these patients. So the advantages of scanners, there are endless. Again, it's just, I could go on and on and on. The advantages are endless. And the obstacles really these days are just the cost. And that survey showed that 66% of people that didn't want to invest or haven't invested yet is because of the cost. And the good thing is, with things like the Medit, the cost is going down and down and down. These days you can buy a scanner, a good scanner, not a cheapy, useless scanner, for 16,000, which is much cheaper than it used to be. The Medit i500 is still a very capable scanner. So we're running out of time, but for the last part, I'll go over the Medit apps. Basically, in the Medit software, you find the apps in the app box, and that's on the bottom left, and that's like their app store. To use the apps, you actually have to open a case, and you'll find the apps where that green arrow is, up there near the case. When the case is open, you actually find these little boxes once you've downloaded the app. And Medit, this is probably the one thing that differentiates Medit compared to any other company, is that their software apps are now becoming, they're just outpacing anyone else in software applications for a scanner. And their software really is more, it's almost more valuable than the scanner itself, and you get it for free. So they have a lot of different apps like Ortho simulation. And the key thing to realize, guys, this is not a full treatment planning software. This is a communication tool, because before, when you had a patient who was interested in orthodontics, how would you explain that to them? It's very hard. You had no real way. You kind of just tell them, oh, your teeth can look straighter, blah, blah, blah. But these days, with a few clicks, you can really show them their own teeth becoming straighter. And there's an animation, and there's ample tools in here, which is quite incredible. The most popular app they have is the Model Builder. And the Model Builder, essentially, before Medit invented this, it was quite tricky to make printable models out of your scans. You had to go into different softwares, and it was quite a process. And they've just simplified that down to 2 to 3 clicks. Takes less than 20 seconds to make a model that you can print, which becomes more important if you're interested in printing in-house and night guard printing and these sort of things. They have a smile design application. Again, look, it's not the prettiest smile design in the world. It's not the most comprehensive 3D smile design. It's only a 2D image smile design, but you're getting it for free, and it's a powerful communication tool to help you get higher treatment acceptance. And most recently, these Medit guys, they don't stop. They're constantly releasing apps. Most recently, they released a temporary crown app. And mark my word, they're going to get into CAD/CAM very soon. I wouldn't be surprised. This seems like a skipping stone to get into crown and bridge design. And you're getting this all for free. Now, there's so much to cover, guys, and we're already about 5 minutes over time. And so, unfortunately, we only have limited time today. So far what we covered is proper scan strategy, retraction, soft tissue management, hardware, and team delegation. And look, I'm certain that you can succeed with digital dentistry. You know, it's a path that's already paved. And it's completely changed our practice and made dentistry better for me and my patients. Now, a lot of you're at a crossroads now. For those of you who don't have a scanner, it's time to take action and go digital. And for those of you who do have a Medit scanner, but you're not really utilizing, you're not getting the speeds, you really have 2 options today. You could do it the way we did it, which took years, and you could figure it out alone, or we can go in this together. And those who want to do it together, it's a great journey, but there's a lot to learn, and it can be challenging on your own. And for those of you who are looking for more help, we would love to help you out. Because again, this survey shows that most of us only get training from a manufacturer, which is hilarious, because anyone who's had that training knows it's average at best. It's a day or 2 maximum, and a couple of hours by a sales rep. So that's why, for those of you who want us to help you further, we have a Mastering Medit course coming up this weekend, and this will be a continuation of everything we learned today in more detail. We're going to be covering edentulous scanning, top and lower, CAD/CAM software, all the different CAD/CAM softwares that you can use, especially Exocad, milling machines for those people who want to get into that, 3D printers, workflows for chairside restorations, and how to get to the next step and start offering that for your patients, especially with apps. The other thing is that included with every course registration is that you get 6 months free access to IDD Online, and that has over 60 hours of CPD that we've made specifically on digital dentistry. And of course, our 90-day satisfaction guarantee, where you can expect it much like today's webinar. We want to pack it with as much information as possible for you. And so how you register is you can go here, you get lifetime access to the recordings. You can register there at instituteofdigitaldentistry.com/Medit. And by the end of the course, what we really want to do is expand on most of the topics we talked about today. We're going to show you how to take perfect intraoral scans for all settings, such as implants, scanning and retraction in more detail than we can achieve in our webinar. We want to go over the specific Medit apps on how to actually use them, our personal clinical guides for our DAs and our dentists, and Exocad and 3D printing. So really, you can either do it trial and error, and that's how we learned, and that took many, many years. Or if you want to really jumpstart, those of you with a Medit scanner, if you want to jumpstart, you can sign up for the course and you can get access to the course recordings for a lifetime. And so you can access them anytime. That's the end of the webinar, guys. We'll go over any final questions, and please, if you have any questions on your mind, put them in the chat section and I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks for your time. So I have a Medit i500. Let's start with Luis. I have a Medit i500 since the beginning of the year, and I have mixed results with occlusion. Do you have a specific setting or technique to make occlusion more accurate? I would stick to the defaults, Luis. I don't know why you're having mixed results, and it's hard to say what those mixed results are. The tricky thing is if you scan and send, it's hard to say whether the lab is designing wrong or you're taking the occlusion wrong. The best advice I can give is make sure if you're constantly getting occlusal issues, start taking full arch scans and take a bite scan of both sides and give that to your lab. If you're still getting occlusal issues from the restorations, it might be your lab. The only way to troubleshoot that is make your lab print you a 3D model and fit the crown on the 3D model. If the crown fits on the 3D model, which is a copy of your scan, but doesn't fit in the mouth, there's a distortion in your scan. If the crown doesn't fit on the 3D model, well, then you know that the lab is probably something you need to have a chat with them about. Do you use a lip retractor? Not routinely, anonymous attendee, mainly just a mirror. Sometimes for my bigger cases, smile design rehabs, I will use the Obtugate routinely, but for bread and butter dentistry single crown, no, not routinely. How do you scan subgingival margin? Great question. Get that question all the time. And again, it just comes down to retraction. The key thing is retraction. If you can't see the margin, do something different. Light will not bend around the gum to capture that margin. So if you can't see the margin, you need to pack retraction cord like crazy in there, or cut the gingiva off with a thermocut burr or a laser until you can see the margin. Once you can see the margin, it's easy. If it's not bleeding, it's very easy. It's just like any other scan. The other thing is that Medit has depth of field gauges where you can put the depth of field much higher. You don't really need to even use that. But in case you were really struggling getting to the bottom of the cavity for some reason, you can play around with those settings, but just stick to the default. It's in the middle of the depth of field gauge, about 18, and keep retraction as your primary goal. Keep the gum off. Any scanning tips on edentulous arches? Yes, it's hard. That's the first tip. So you need a lot of practice. You need a really good retraction. So with edentulous arches, really quickly, most of the time the issue is with the lower, especially if it's flabby ridge, because the scanner will pick up something, and if the tissue moves and you pick up that same area, it will look like an artifact on the scan. So you need to make sure somehow with good retraction, you make sure none of the tissue is moving. The rest is following protocols. There's a very good protocol by Lo Rousseau. If you Google that, Lo Rousseau, edentulous scanning protocol, that's the protocol I use. Highly polished crowns. Tips, roughen them up. So you either roughen them up with sandblaster, but that's, you know, I wouldn't do that to someone's really pretty crown. So you either put scan spray on them, or you put the metal scanning mode on. There's a little icon at the bottom of the bar in the Medit, and it's a metal scanning icon. The other thing, I don't even use any of these things, to be honest. In even the shiniest crown, I just go over it in many different directions and turn off your operatory light and turn off your loop light, so you're not getting a lot of reflection off the gold crown. In the Medit, are you able to switch the color of the light? In the Medit i500, you can. In the i700, you can't. I use the i700 now. I think it's a redundant feature. I wouldn't bother. Scanning tips, yeah, to be honest, the exact sterilization instructions, thanks George for the question, thanks everyone actually. The exact sterilization instructions are basically found on Medit's website. I don't have the exact details. Unfortunately, there are some things I do delegate and leave to my staff. One little tip is make sure you get a piece of square gauze and put it in the mirror area where the scanning tip is. Pack it in there, not too tightly, but pack it in there will prevent you getting water spots. What's the reason for double teeth? Double teeth is basically an issue with stitching. So the really issue with stitching is that you've either moved or the scanner has stitched part of the scan and then it's stitching the same scan data but in a different area. My advice, if you ever get double teeth, it's mainly because you haven't followed the strategy close enough, or you move erratically. So the scan starts, for instance, if you scan the molar and then a canine, it may attach the canine to where it thinks it should stitch up to the molar, which is wrong. My advice is when you get double stitching or double teeth, just clear the scan. Don't try to scan over it. Just clear it, start again. Do you use reliability map? Not routinely while scanning. I just like the color mode, and I feel like reliability map slows down the PC a bit. I definitely check it at the end. So I do my scan in color mode because that's what I prefer. And I usually have a good enough scan strategy now that I don't really need it. But at the end, I will check reliability map and make sure green is on your margins, your teeth, and your contacts. You don't really need to worry about it on, the buccal of the canine, which doesn't actually matter too much. Now, sometimes I have a hard time scanning of a lost tooth between two existing teeth. The issue with that is to do with the depth of field. So the common thing is here's a lost tooth, and you probably, with your scanner, you hold your scanner high up to scan the teeth, and then when you let me move this way, sorry. When you're moving across this edentulous area, your scanner is too high to pick up the edentulous area, which dips in. So typically it's a depth of field issue. You need to move your scanner down. You need to follow almost like the path. So from the peak of the tooth down to the edentulous area. How much better is i700? Much better. For orthodontic aligners alone, look, it's about a 3,000 or 4,000 USD difference. I like it for the quality of life improvements. It's definitely faster. And my favorite feature of the Medit i700 personally is that it can just be attached with a single wire, USB-C to a laptop. It sounds like a really redundant feature, but it's incredible. When you're moving around clinics or you want to quickly get it out of the drawer to plug it in, there's no power cables and power boxes and plugging it into the wall. It's just straight into the laptop. It's a great feature. I would personally get the i700. Full arch, yes. Lip and cheek retractors, yes, I routinely do. So my DA and me are routinely retracting the lip and cheeks with mirrors. She's holding a mirror, I'm holding a mirror, routinely. Don't try to do a full arch scan without retraction. It'll be a very messy scan. The summit, yeah, it's recorded. Whoever asked that, I assume you're talking about the course we're going to run. The whole course is recorded. Anyone who registers can get access to the recordings for a lifetime. So you don't need to attend live unless you have questions like people have today. Michael, there will be one eventually. I don't know about soon because it's just getting busier and busier, but definitely look, the best way if you want to get access to it again is just get the recordings. And what we will likely be doing, because there's a number of people that are signing up but are not going to attend, we're going to likely hold a few question and answer sessions between those who register. So that way they can get around not being able to attend. Can you build up a upper and lower quadrant model and occlusion with the app, or is it only for one arch? I believe you're talking about the Smile Design. You can't build up the occlusion. I think you're talking about the Smile Design app. The Smile Design app is only for a 2D kind of like Photoshop on the teeth. You can't do a 3D build-up. You need to use CAD software, things like Exocad, which we cover in the course. Philip, that's a great question. Do you need to turn off room lights when scanning? No, no, no. That is, unless your room lights are like a solar panel, you know. I mean, like solar, a panel of light. No, you don't need to turn off your lights. Your room lights can stay on. It's a bit creepy as well if you turn that off for the patient. All I would suggest is turn off your loop light, because that's a direct light right into the mouth, and turn off your operatory light. So your chair light, turn that off. I see you standing up, difference versus sitting. That's you have a very keen eye, Maritza. Now, I am just a standing dentist. I find that it's more comfortable for me. I don't think it will make too much of a difference. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. I do find when I'm standing, I can maneuver a lot more. So when I'm maneuvering around the quadrant and the arch, but it's really up to you. There's a lot of dentists that just sit and scan, no problem. Is there a level 2? Big yes, we will eventually release a level 2, and that's going to be not so much about the basics, but really getting into crown and bridge, workflows, in-house CAD/CAM, in-house designs, really getting into more of the moving things from sending it to your lab to actually doing it in-house and the benefits that can have for your patients. All right, so a couple of things in the chat. Now, as a dental technician, we generally request the margin is marked. That is a great point by Scott. Mark the margin. The Medit has a great feature, and a lot of scanners do nowadays, that you can mark the margin. The reason why same-day dentistry is so effective is that you as the dentist know where the margin is. You just cut it. And sometimes on the scan, it's not perfectly clear. The algorithm can smooth some areas. Not always, but sometimes. And so if you mark the margin, it makes your technician's job much easier. Also, like Scott said, this whole knife edge margin thing, it really isn't that suitable for a lot of CAD/CAM dentistry. Stick to chamfers and shoulders. Autofill feature, Adam, great point. I don't use the autofill feature at all. Don't rely on that, guys. The autofill feature is a feature on the Medit that if you have a gap, the AI will fill it in. Logic says that the AI may get it wrong. It's just connecting 2 points together and filling it in. So make sure if there's any gaps in key areas like the contact, like the prep, no, you need to go back and scan that. Don't rely on an autofill feature. Ali, no problem, my friend. Joseph, I do that every single day, minimum 1 or 2 times a day. So I do CAD/CAM in-house with it's completely modelless. The only time we're using models is implant restorations, full arch restorations, more complicated treatments where there's more variability for things to go wrong. The same-day restorations, no, it's definitely modelless. Scan, design, mill, no model, put it in the mouth. You are more than welcome. My pleasure, Gustavo. Something about plastic sleeves, which is also a great point. No, plastic sleeves are not used. You just autoclave and sterilize the scanners. The reason why is, again, the scanners is shooting out light and it's going to reflect off something. And if you have a plastic sleeve in the way, it inhibits that light being able to reach your object of scanning. So no. How often do you need to calibrate the scanner? That's a great question. It comes up with a message when you need to calibrate it. The Medit software is very user-friendly. It just tells you need to calibrate now. I like to routinely do it every maybe 3-4 days. Again, something your nurse can do either at the end of the day or before a big treatment. If it's a very vital treatment, like a full arch restorations, I'm calibrating. My pleasure, guys. More than welcome. I think that's basically the last questions. Again, thank you everyone for attending. And I'm glad that you guys, got something out of it. Now, do you use the glove color icon? I assume, Arnie, you may be talking about the color filtering. So Medit has a very unique feature in it where you can tell it, hey, you can scan anything and tell it, ignore this color. I don't personally look, it has some uses, especially people that use, if you're really struggling with scanning, you can ignore your gloves. I don't often use it, to be honest. I don't see the need. It's a great feature. It has some niche, applications, but for day-to-day dentistry, I don't bother with any of this stuff. Just turn it on and scan and just practice to get good at scanning. That's all you need to do. It was good not to sleep in Germany. My pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us. I don't know what time it is in Germany, but I really appreciate you staying up with us. Maybe I'll see you one day. I hope to come to the next IDS. Please, the link to understand more about the computer specs. I'll just send everyone who attended that screenshot. I'll put it on the screen right now, actually. Give me 1 second. So you can take a screenshot, but I can also send it. Here's the computer specs. All right, guys, we're going to conclude the webinar. Thanks again, everyone. All the best. Stay safe out there in this crazy world, and hopefully we can meet in person one day. See you later, guys.